The rain had started as a soft drizzle that morning, but by late afternoon the city was drowning in it. Sheets of water cascading down the narrow streets, the sky a dull, bruised gray, and every road choked with honking cars and flashing hazard lights. Sarah Miller, 23 years old, petite with chestnut hair pulled into a messy bun, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other gripping her phone, stumbled out of her apartment, building with panic in her hazel eyes. She had been told by her doctor that she still had 2 weeks before her due date, but the sharp, gut-deep pain that twisted through her made her knees buckle. The first contraction had hit like a punch, and now they were coming faster, stronger, merciless. Her hospital was just 5 miles away, but in this weather it might as well have been another city. She waved desperately at the blur of passing headlights until a yellow taxi slid to a stop beside her, water splashing up over the curb. Behind the wheel was Ahmed Karim, 50 years old, with salt and pepper hair peeking from under a worn cap, deep lines etched into his warm brown face, and eyes that carried both the weight of 1,000 quiet struggles and the softness of someone who still noticed the smallest kindnesses. "Hospital?" he asked, his voice calm and accented, and when she nodded frantically, he pulled away with surprising speed for the gridlocked road ahead. The smell of rain-soaked leather and faint spices from his lunch lingered in the cab as Sarah shifted uncomfortably in the back seat, biting her lip to stop from crying out. Ahmed kept glancing at her in the mirror, reading the tension in her clenched fists, the sweat already dampening her forehead. Traffic slowed to a complete standstill as a police siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Another contraction tore through her. This one so fierce, she let out a choked scream, and Ahmed's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Breathe, sister, breathe," he murmured, his voice steady but his heartbeat quickening. He dialed emergency services with one hand, speaking in quick, clipped sentences, but the dispatcher's answer was grim. No ambulance could reach them in time. The streets were flooded, intersections blocked. Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps now, her legs trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Ahmed looked out at the rain-smeared chaos ahead, then back at her pale, desperate face. The realization hit him like a jolt of lightning. They were not going to make it to the hospital. His taxi, this old, rattling vessel with worn seats and a cracked dashboard, was about to become a delivery room. He eased the car toward the side of the road, the thud of rain on the roof growing louder, the city around them fading into a blur. "It's just you and me now," he said quietly, meeting her gaze in the rearview mirror, his voice a strange mix of reassurance and urgency. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, a new life was about to arrive whether they were ready or not. Ahmed's voice was steady, but his eyes flickered with urgency as he twisted in his seat to face her. "I have seen this before. You will be okay," he assured, his accent rolling softly through the storm. Sarah clutched the backrest, her knuckles white, another contraction tearing through her so fiercely she cried out. The rain pounded on the taxi roof like 100 frantic fists, the glass fogging with their breath, the smell of damp air and leather wrapping around them. Ahmed jumped out, the storm instantly drenching his jacket, and grabbed an old blanket from the trunk, a half-empty bottle of water, and a few clean towels from a plastic bag. Relics he always kept just in case. He slid back in, closing the door against the wind, and turned to her. "Breathe. Look at me. We will do this together." She tried, her chest heaving, eyes shimmering with fear. The city outside was chaos, car horns blaring, water splashing against curbs. But inside the taxi, it was a world of 2 people fighting for one new life. Ahmed crouched sideways in the driver's seat, guiding her through the waves of pain, telling her to push when the moment came. His own memories flashed. The night his wife gave birth back in his village, the candlelight, the cries, the helpless joy. Now here he was, years later, delivering a stranger's child on a flooded city street. Sarah gripped his forearm like a lifeline, sweat mixing with raindrops on her temple, and with one final cry that rose above the storm, a small, wet, wriggling form slipped into Ahmed's hands. For a moment, the world went still. The baby's cry pierced the air, high and perfect, a sound that filled the cramped taxi with something brighter than the headlights outside. Sarah sobbed openly, arms trembling as Ahmed wrapped the baby in the blanket and placed him gently in her embrace. "He's beautiful," Ahmed said, smiling with tired eyes. She whispered, "Thank you," over and over, her tears falling onto the newborn's soft cheek. Ahmed's hands shook slightly, not from fear now, but from the awe of having been part of something so sacred. Without asking for assent, he started the engine, pulling away slowly, weaving through the rain until the hospital lights glowed ahead. The nurses rushed out, but Sarah looked back at Ahmed one last time before they took her inside, memorizing the face of the man who had brought her son into the world. He gave her a small wave, rain dripping from his cap, and then he was gone, swallowed back into the storm. If this moment touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so we can bring you more real, powerful stories that deserve to be told. Years passed, and the night of the storm became a sacred story in the Miller household, told not with drama, but with the deep reverence Sarah carried for the man who had appeared like a guardian in the rain. She tried, in the first weeks after Daniel's birth, to find Ahmed Karim. She called taxi companies, asked around in neighborhoods, even visited the hospital records office, but no one could trace a driver by that name from that night. It was as if he had been a passing angel whose purpose was fulfilled and who had quietly returned to the shadows of the city. Sarah, still petite but now with tired eyes and the graceful patience of a mother, raised Daniel in a small two-bedroom apartment, working double shifts as a receptionist. They didn't have much. Sometimes dinner was instant noodles and toast, but she poured love into every moment. Daniel grew fast, a boy with thick brown hair and the same hazel eyes as his mother, curious about everything, especially the story of the night he was born. By the time he was 12, he could recite it word for word, always lingering on the part where Ahmed had said, "Asterisk, it's just you and me now." Asterisk, that line, seemed to anchor something inside him, a reminder that strangers could choose to show up when it mattered most. In high school, Daniel became a top student, taking every scholarship opportunity he could find, often skipping parties to work at a local cafe to help his mother with rent. He never forgot Ahmed's name. It became more than a memory. It became a mission. After college, with a degree in business and a small startup that grew into a thriving company, Daniel found himself, at only 20 years old, in a position to finally act on the promise he'd quietly made as a boy, to find Ahmed Karim and thank him in a way that mattered. But the city had changed. Taxi companies were digital now. Drivers were tired, records lost. Ahmed could be anywhere. Daniel began searching with the same determination his mother had once carried, calling old dispatch offices, visiting driver hangouts, leaving notes and flyers with a single line under the photograph of his mother holding him as a newborn. Asterisk, looking for the man who delivered me in his taxi on the stormy night of April 14th. Asterisk days turned into weeks with no answer. Then, just as he was beginning to wonder if fate would keep them apart forever, an elderly former dispatcher remembered hearing about a driver named Ahmed who had moved to the city's outskirts after losing his wife. Daniel's heart pounded as he scribbled down the address. Somewhere beyond the noise and lights of the city, the man who had once caught his first breath might still be waiting. If you believe in the power of kindness and fate, please like, share, and subscribe so more true stories like this can reach hearts everywhere. Daniel's hands trembled as he followed the faded address scribbled on the scrap of paper. The city gave way to quieter streets lined with crooked trees and small, aging houses, each with their own story written in peeling paint and worn steps. His car rolled to a stop in front of a modest one-story home with a rusted chain-link fence and a taxi parked in the driveway. Not the bright yellow of the city fleet, but an old, faded model with its paint scratched and roof light long gone. His heart skipped. This had to be it. Daniel stepped out, the cool air smelling faintly of rain, and walked up the creaking path. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of a man sitting in an armchair, gray hair, shoulders slightly hunched, flipping through a worn leather photo album. Daniel hesitated at the gate, suddenly afraid that 20 years of imagining this moment would crash into reality and leave him disappointed. What if Ahmed didn't remember? What if he didn't care? But then, he remembered Sarah's voice telling the story, the way she always said, Asterisk, without him, you might not even be here. Asterisk, that thought pushed him forward. He knocked gently twice. A pause. The sound of slow footsteps. The door opened, and there he was, Ahmed Karim, older now, but still with the same sharp eyes, the same warmth buried beneath lines of time. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Daniel tried to speak, but his throat tightened. Finally, he held out the flyer, the one with Sarah holding him as a newborn, and whispered, Asterisk, this is me. Asterisk. Ahmed's hand trembled as he took the paper, his eyes darting from the photo to Daniel's face. And in that instant, recognition hit. His lips parted in disbelief. It's you, he said softly, his voice breaking. Asterisk, it's really you. Asterisk, if you believe in moments that can change a life forever, please like, share. And Ahmed stepped back, almost stumbling as if the years had suddenly caught up with him. Come in, he said softly, his voice shaky, and Daniel followed him into the small living room. The air smelled faintly of tea leaves and old wood. The furniture was simple but clean, the kind of home built on years of quiet routine. On the coffee table sat the photo album Daniel had glimpsed through the window, and, as Ahmed sat, he opened it and turned it toward Daniel. There, tucked between faded family pictures and newspaper clippings, was a single, slightly water-damaged photo of Sarah cradling newborn Daniel in the back seat of a taxi. Ahmed traced the edge of the picture with his finger. That night, I didn't think you'd survive. The rain was so heavy, the roads so bad. And your mother, his voice cracked. She was so brave. Daniel swallowed hard. She's the reason I'm here. But so are you. Ahmed shook his head. I just did what anyone would. No, Daniel said firmly. Most wouldn't. But you stayed. You delivered me. You got us to the hospital. You never even gave your name to my mom. For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of a wall clock. Ahmed's eyes softened, but Daniel could see the weariness in them, the weight of someone who had spent a life working without expecting thanks. Finally, Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out a thick envelope. I came here to tell you something, he said, his voice steady. I built a good life, Ahmed. I've done well. And it's because I learned from my mom's story that when you save someone, you change the course of their life. Now it's my turn. Ahmed looked puzzled. Daniel placed the envelope on the table. Tomorrow, I'm taking you somewhere. It's going to be yours. Ahmed frowned slightly, confused, but there was a flicker of emotion, a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. If you believe gratitude should be shown while we still have the chance, please like, share, and subscribe so these true stories reach more. The next morning, the sun broke through a thin layer of clouds as Daniel pulled up in front of Ahmed's house, the old taxi still in the driveway, like a faithful companion. Ahmed stepped outside, cardigan buttoned, his face etched with both curiosity and caution. He slid into the passenger seat without a word, and they drove in silence through the winding streets until the neighborhoods began to change. The houses newer, the gardens greener, the air somehow lighter. Finally, Daniel turned into a quiet cul-de-sac and stopped in front of a freshly painted two-story home with a red door and a small garden blooming with sunflowers. Ahmed looked at him, puzzled, but Daniel just smiled, stepped out, and handed him a set of keys. This, he said, is yours. Ahmed froze, staring at the keys as if they might vanish. I can't, he stammered, his voice trembling. Daniel's eyes glistened. You gave me life, Ahmed. 20 years ago, you didn't think twice about helping my mother. You didn't ask for money, for thanks, for anything. You just gave. And I've been waiting for the day I could give something back. For a moment, Ahmed's lips moved, but no sound came, and then his eyes brimmed over. He gripped Daniel's shoulders, pulling him into a rough, tearful hug. The old taxi sat in the driveway behind them, a silent witness to the circle that had finally closed. Sometimes gratitude isn't about words, it's about actions that speak across decades. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because kindness like this deserves to be remembered. The rain had started as a soft drizzle that morning, but by late afternoon the city was drowning in it. Sheets of water cascading down the narrow streets, the sky a dull, bruised gray, and every road choked with honking cars and flashing hazard lights. Sarah Miller, 23 years old, petite with chestnut hair pulled into a messy bun, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other